Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to see so many BU faces in the audience for this. This is lovely. We are very happy to have you here today. And if you don't have a program, raise your hand and I'll get you one. These will be the guide. Readers will not be introduced as they come up. They will come up in order as they appear in the program. If you have not been to our website, go check out, we have our next reading on October 3rd, the Robert Lowell Memorial Lecture Series. We would love to see you there. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the man responsible for 25 fabulous years of this public arts project and the founder of the Favorite Poem Project, Robert Pinsky.
Thank you, Annette. I'd like to speak to you about the high-minded spiritual and moral benefits of poetry and of this program, but I won't. Instead, I'd like to talk about the practical success of this program, the worldly success and prominence of it that it has brought to Boston University and to many of us affiliated with BU or not. The BU edX MOOC, Massive Online Open Course, based on this project was, I think, the only one that was more successful at the time was the one about baseball statistics. It was immensely followed in places like India, the Philippines, China. For 20 years, the Favorite Poem Project, in cooperation with the BU School of Education, had a one-week summer seminar for K through 12 teachers. That's 20 years of teachers and their students and their colleagues who brought the pleasure, emotional, intellectual, and sensory of pleasure to many, many, many people. 3 different anthologies based on this project, where each poem is accompanied by remarks from a reader, very rarely a poet or a teacher like myself, many different professions, regional accents, kinds of education. Those 3 anthologies were published by W.W. Norton and Company, which is not a charitable institution. They published the books again and again. They published one and then another because they made money selling them to people who wanted them. For many years, the PBS NewsHour with Jim Lehrer showed videos that were made, thanks to Boston University, in the Favorite Poem Project. We've managed to add a few, and they're all visible at favoritepoem.org. So I'm very glad to leave for what will be obvious, which is the spirit-enlivening, mind-awakening, soul-expressing aspects of people reading poems and sometimes saying them in their own voice, not as the author, but as the re-embodiment of the author. And I'm proud and happy to leave you with the idea that this is a successful arts project, public arts project, as Annette said, and a successful manifestation of the humanities and arts. Not just this project, but creative writing courses in general continue to attract electives, not just because they're easy, but because there's a great, deep, traditional, long-based, history-based pleasure that they involve. And now I will make a prediction and introduce one of the progenitors of the Favorite Poem Project who will begin the reading. The prediction is, this will be fun. Here is Maggie Dietz.
Hi. It's so wonderful to be here, and BU is really a home to me. In 1996, I started the graduate creative writing program here. I met my husband at BU. He was studying with Christopher Ricks, who will be reading today. So there are many, many connections, and of course, I worked on the Favorite Poem Project and with Robert for many years. I'm going to talk about another alum who I met 22 years ago when she was 9 years old. I was assigned to be her big sister through the Big Sisters program in Boston, and her name is Taomi Cruz Ramirez, at the time Taomi Cruz. And we had wanted to invite her today, but she lives now in Florida, and she's the mother of toddler twins. So I decided to read a poem that connects to the time that I spent with that young person who then later came to this university, not only for an undergraduate degree, but for a graduate degree in education. So she was 9 when I met her, and she loved to read and write. And that's why I was sort of assigned to her by the organization. And we would look at poems together. And I decided, in part based on my work at the Favorite Poem Project, that I wasn't going to give her nursery rhymes or easy poems or children's poems, that I would just show her poems that I love. And no one had yet taught Taomi that poetry is hard, or that it's not for her, or that the teacher understands it and she can't, right? And she was completely open every time I showed her something, including this poem, which is not an easy poem, although I don't find desolation in it, and I don't think it's a cold poem. This is The Snowman by Wallace Stevens, and I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to say a little bit about Taomi's response to it when we shared it over lunch at the Joseph Hurley School those years ago. The Snowman. One must have a mind of winter to regard the frost and the boughs of the pine trees crusted with snow, and have been cold a long time to behold the junipers shagged with ice, the spruces rough in the distant glitter of the January sun, and not to think of any misery in the sound of the wind, in the sound of a few leaves, which is the sound of the land full of the same wind that is blowing in the same bare place for the listener who listens in the snow, and nothing himself beholds nothing that is not there, and the nothing that is. And I shared this poem with this kid, and she said, and I know that exactly what she said because I wrote it all down. I can't believe that. It's magic. And we sat and looked at it, and we talked about the difference between regard and behold. And she started to identify what she said were winter words in the poem. She said cold and wind and snow. And then she got to shagged and glitter. And then she said, and nothing. Nothing is a winter word. And I just waited. I wanted her to explain. And she said, because sometimes you wake up in the winter and you want to do nothing.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Cravella. I'm a computer scientist, data scientist. I'm a professor in the computer science department and in the Faculty of Computing and Data Sciences. So this poem is one that I've known since I was in my teens, but it came to really resonate with me around the time that I was in graduate school, and I started doing research. And the reason is because the poem for me really captures, in so many different ways, the feeling for me, at least, of doing research in the sciences. So the poem is For Once Then Something by Robert Frost. Others taunt me with having knelt at well curbs, always wrong to the light. So never seeing deeper down in the well, then where the water gives me back in a shining surface picture, me, myself, in the summer heaven, godlike, looking out of a wreath of fern and cloud puffs. Once, when trying with chin against a well curb, I discerned, as I thought, beyond the picture, through the picture, a something white, uncertain, something more of the depths. Then I lost it. Water came to rebuke the too clear water. One drop fell from a fern, and lo, a ripple shook whatever it was lay there at the bottom, blurred it, blotted it out. What was that whiteness? Truth? A pebble of quartz? For once then, something.
Hi everyone, I'm Zhu. I'm a sophomore here at BU studying sociology and psychology. I picked this poem because I think people in my generation are often taught that there's not a lot of time to rest and to heal. And I spent a lot of time this summer trying to do just that, and I think this piece made me feel a little less alone. This is Adrienne Rich's Diving into the Wreck. First, having read the Book of Myths and loaded the camera and checked the edge of the knife blade, I put on the body armor of black rubber, the absurd flippers, the grave and awkward mask. I am having to do this. Not like Cousteau with his assiduous team aboard the sun-flooded schooner, but here alone. There is a ladder. The ladder is always there, hanging innocently close to the side of the schooner. We know what it is for, we who have used it. Otherwise, it's a piece of maritime floss, some sundry equipment. I go down. Rung after rung, and still the oxygen immerses me, the blue light, the clear atoms of our human air. I go down. My flippers cripple me. I crawl like an insect down the ladder, and there is no one to tell me when the ocean will begin. First, the air is blue, and then it is bluer, and then green, and then black. I am blacking out, and yet my mask is powerful. It pumps my blood with power. The sea is another story. The sea is not a question of power. I have to learn alone to turn my body without force in the deep element. And now, it is easy to forget what I came for among so many who have always lived here, swaying their crenellated fans between the reefs, and besides, you breathe differently down here. I came to explore the wreck. The words are purposes, the words are maps. I came to see the damage that was done and the treasures that prevail. I stroke the beam of my lamp slowly along the flank of something more permanent than fish or weed, the thing I came for, the wreck, and not the story of the wreck, the thing itself, and not the myth. The drowned face always staring toward the sun, the evidence of damage worn by salt and sway into this threadbare beauty, the ribs of the disaster, curving their assertion among the tentative haunters. This is the place, and I am here. The mermaid whose dark hair streams black, the merman in his armored body, we circle silently about the wreck, we dive into the hold. I am she. I am he whose drowned face sleeps with open eyes, whose breasts still bear the stress, whose silver, copper, vermeil cargo lies obscurely inside barrels, half wedged and left to rot. We are the half-destroyed instruments that once held to a course, the water-eaten log, the fouled compass. We are, I am, you are, by cowardice or courage, the one who find our way back to this scene carrying a knife, a camera, a book of myths in which our names do not appear. Thank you.
The poet whom I favor today is a man called James Henry. And I favor him because of the happy-come-lucky way in which I ever came to read him. I read him solely because his name is not that of the great American novelist Henry James. His name is James Henry, and in the library I took down a book by James Henry, intrigued and kind of silly. I didn't know that he was an Irish doctor who became perhaps the greatest Virgil scholar of the age. And he traveled throughout Europe looking at Virgil manuscripts with his wife and with his daughter, who themselves made great contributions to Virgilian scholarship. I did give a lecture once at Bard College, and the president of the college introduced me as the person who had edited the poems of Henry James. I had not done that, and he did not in any case stay for the lecture. Old Man. The poem is 1856. It's this pair, small sequence. At 6 years old, I had before mine eyes a picture painted like the rainbow, bright, but far, far off in the unapproachable distance. With all my childish heart, I longed to reach it, and strove the livelong day in vain, advancing with slow steps some few short yards, but not perceptibly the distance lessening. At 70 years old, when almost within grasp of my outstretched arms, the self-same picture with all its beauteous colours painted bright, I'm backward from it, further borne each day by an invisible compulsive force, gradual but yet so steady, sure and rapid that at 70 I'll from the picture be even more distant than I was at 6. And then Very Old Man, which is also about the biblical span. I give it to you because I am now 80 years and 10, that is 90, so I could look back upon James Henry with gratitude for how calm he is. Very Old Man. I well remember how some 70 years and 10 ago, a helpless babe, I toddled from chair to chair about my mother's chamber, feeling, as it were, my way in the new world, and foolishly afraid of, or as it might be foolishly pleased with, the unknown objects round me. And now with stiffened joints, I sit all day in one of those same chairs, as foolishly, hoping or fearing, something from me hid behind the thick dark veil which I see hourly and minutely on every side, round closing, and from my view, all objects shutting out. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Austin Elise Mayfield. I am an alum of the creative writing program from 05-06, and Ju was kind enough to say that was the year after I was born. She and I are still friends. As I was sharing this opportunity that I had to read today with friends on Facebook and LinkedIn, I referred to myself as perhaps a prodigal poet, but the reality is that you never leave poetry and it never leaves you. What I do today is likely very different from what I'll do tomorrow, but one of the things that I am forever grateful to this program and to Robert and to my other poetry uncle, Carl Phillips, for giving me is seeing beauty in all of the things and being committed to perpetuating it. This poem is by Jack Gilbert. It's called A Brief for the Defense, and to me, it is, it's how I sit with the world, and I'm really excited to share it with you. A brief for the defense. Sorrow everywhere, slaughter everywhere. If babies are not starving someplace, they are starving somewhere else, with flies in their nostrils. But we enjoy our lives because that's what God wants. Otherwise, the mornings before summer dawn would not be made so fine. The Bengal tiger would not be fashioned so miraculously well. The poor women at the fountain are laughing together between the suffering they have known and the awfulness in their future, smiling and laughing while somebody in the village is very sick. There is laughter every day in the terrible streets of Calcutta, and the women laugh in the cages of Bombay. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight, not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. If the locomotive of the Lord runs us down, we should give thanks that the end had magnitude. We must admit there will be music despite everything. We stand at the prow again of a small ship anchored late at night in the tiny port, looking over to the sleeping island. The waterfront is 3 shuttered cafes and 1 naked light burning. To hear the faint sound of oars and the silence as a rowboat comes slowly out and then goes back is truly worth all the years of sorrow that are to come.
I'm Tamsin Flanders, and I'm very grateful to Annette and Robert for inviting me to participate. I will read 2 poems from James Joyce's early collection, Chamber Music, which my mother introduced me to when I was a very small child. It's a slim volume on the shelf, and I am quite chagrined to say that it slipped through my fingers when my siblings and I were disposing of our parents' libraries. Maybe one of them has it, I don't know. I have to look into that. So I have a piece of paper instead of a book. When I was first introduced to these, I was of the mind that they had been written for the Flanders family because one of our pastimes was playing chamber music. somewhat later, it dawned on me that in 1907, Joyce did not know that he was writing these for the mid-century Flanders family. I then re-encountered or circled back to the poems when I was in high school and I was in a music composition class. We were charged with setting a song to music, and I thought of these, I suppose intuitively, because they have short line lengths, they're very lyrical. And I didn't know at the time that they had been set many, many times over and continue to be by composers from all different genres. Later, I sang 3 of the settings by the great American composer Samuel Barber. But now I just give you the first 2 so that I can kind of recuperate the first encounter, and also as a tribute to my parents who gave me words and music. 2 from Chamber Music by James Joyce. 1. Strings in the earth and air make music sweet. Strings by the river where the willows meet. There's music along the river, for love wanders there. Pale flowers on his mantle, dark leaves on his hair, all softly playing, with head to the music bent, and fingers straying upon an instrument. 2. The twilight turns from amethyst to deep and deeper blue. The lamp fills with a pale green glow the trees of the avenue. The old piano plays an air, sedate and slow and gay. She bends upon the yellow keys, her head inclines this way. Shy thought and grave, wide eyes, and hands that wander as they list. The twilight turns to darker blue with lights of amethyst. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Maya Giladi. I'm an assistant professor of English here where I teach Latinx literature. This task of finding one poem that you love was impossible, and it took me so long to figure out what I wanted to pick. And I actually ended up choosing a poem that is new to me, but that I've been thinking a lot about recently. We are in Latinx Heritage Month right now, so I thought, a Latinx writer. But I think, kind of like Austin and Elise said before, what does it mean to transform? To me, in this poem, really sort of violent histories and then the intimacy of the body and human connection, and to make those things beautiful. Post-colonial love poem by Natalie Diaz. I've been taught bloodstones can cure a snake bite, can stop the bleeding. Most people forgot this when the war ended. The war ended depending on which war you mean, those we started, before those millennia ago and onward, those which started me, which I lost and won, these ever-blooming wounds. I was built by wage, so I wage love and worse. Always another campaign to march across a desert night for the cannon flash of your pale skin, settling in a silver lagoon of smoke at your breast. I dismount my dark horse, bend you there, deliver you, the hard pull of all my thirsts. I learned drink in a country of drought. We pleasure to hurt, leave marks the size of stones, each cabochon polished by our mouths. I, your lapidary wheel turning, green mottled red, the jaspers of our desires. There are wildflowers in my desert, which take up to 20 years to bloom. The seed sleeps like geodes beneath hot feldspar sand until a flash flood bolts the arroyo, lifting them into its copper current, opens them with memory. They remember what their God whispered into their ribs. Wake up and ache for your life. Where your hands have been are diamonds, on my shoulders, down my back, thighs. I am your culebra. I am in the dirt for you. Your hips are quartz light and dangerous. 2 rose-horned rams ascending a soft desert wash before the November sky, untethers 100-year flood. The desert returns suddenly to its ancient sea. Arise the wild heliotrope, scorpion weed, blue phacelia, which hold purple the way a throat can hold the shape of any great hand. Great hands is what she called mine. The rain will eventually come or not. Until then, we touch our bodies like wounds. The war never ended and somehow begins again. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alalia Nugid, and I'm a graduate of the MFA program here at Boston U. This is my first time back in Boston in 7 years, and I'm so delighted to be here to participate in this reading with you all and to reconnect with old friends. So I was first introduced to this poem nearly 15 years ago when I was an undergrad at Northwestern by the poet Mary Kinsey. And this poem, a line in it, haunted me so much so that I had it tattooed on my forearm, always in sight. And seeing it always reminds me of the warring desires within me and within the poem, namely the desire to disappear wholly into art, whether one's own or another's creation, and the desire to be fully present in the moment with loved ones. You cannot have both at once, yet they are both your fate. Guilty of Dust by Frank Bedart. Up or down from the infinite center, brimming at the winking rim of time, the voice in my head said, love is the distance between you and what you love. What you love is your fate. Then I saw the parade of my loves, those performers, comics, actors, singers. Forgetful of my very self, so often I desired to die to myself, to live in them. Then my parents, my friends, the drained specters once filled with my baffled infatuations. Love and guilt and fury and sweetness for whom nail spirit yearning to the earth. Then the voice in my head said, whether you love what you love or live in divided, ceaseless revolt against it, what you love is your fate. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rav Ofer, an astronomy professor, and I'm going to read you a poem of one of my favorite poets that I come back to her again and again, Questions of Travel by Elizabeth Bishop. And this poem in particularly spoke to me. I first encountered Bishop when I was growing up in Brazil, so I had no idea she spent time in Brazil. And especially this poem, and took me like by, it was an amazing impression reading her. And in particularly this poem, she touches, if you see the first phrase you will see, it's a shock, it's an encounter of two cultures, the way that she writes in very New England, everything very close to her heart, and the exuberance of emotions that is Brazil, that I think made Bishop a little uncomfortable. And I like that tension between those two. And the other very central theme of this poem that very close to me is what is home? And part of my research is trying to figure out our home in the galaxy, but Bishop is one of a central driving force. What is home? So she talks about it here, and it's I think, in a majestic way. Okay, so questions of travel. There are too many waterfalls here. The crowded streams hurry too rapidly down to the sea, and the pressure of so many clouds on the mountaintops makes them spill over the sides in soft, slow motion, turning to waterfalls under our very eyes. For if those streaks, those mile-long, shiny tear stains, aren't waterfalls yet, in a quick age or so, as ages go here, they probably will be. But if the streams and clouds keep traveling, the mountains look like the hulls of capsized ships, slime-hung and barnacled. Think of the long trip home. Should we have stayed at home in thoughts of here? Where should we be today? Is it right to be watching strangers in a play in these strangest of theaters? What childishness is it that while there is a breath of life in our bodies, we are determined to rush to see the sun the other way around, the tiniest green hummingbird in the world, to stare at some inexplicable old stonework, inexplicable and impenetrable at any view, instantly seen and always, always delightful. Must we dream our dreams and have them too? And have we room to one more folded sunset, still quite warm? But surely it would have been pity not to have seen the trees along this road really exaggerated in their beauty, not to have seen them gesturing like noble pantomimes robed in pink, not to have had to stop for gas and heard the sad two-noted wooden tune of disparate wooden clogs carelessly clagging over in grease-stained filling station floor. In another country, the clogs would have been tested. Each pair there would have been identical pitch. A pity not to have heard the other, less primitive music of the fat brown bird who sings above the broken gasoline pump in a bamboo church of Jesuit Baroque. 3 towers, 5 silver crosses. Yes, a pity not to have pondered, blurredly and inconclusively, of what connection can exist for centuries between the crudest wooden footwear and careful and finicky the weeded fantasies of wooden cages. Never to have studied history in the weak calligraphy of songbirds' cages, and never to have had to listen to rain, so much like politician speeches, 2 hours of unrelenting oratory, and then a sudden golden silence in which the traveler takes a notebook, writes. Is it lack of imagination that make us come to imagine places, not to just stay at home? Or could Pascal have been not entirely right about just sitting quietly in one's room? Continent, city, country, society. The choice is never wide and never free. And here or there, no. Should we have stayed at home, wherever that may be?
Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Parkinson, and I'm a graduate of the BU Poetry Program. I'm going to read a poem today called For His Father. You won't know it until the end of this sentence, but you are living in the year of my father's passing, as am I. And so what you're going to hear is a poem from a poet I don't know well, from a book that I've recently encountered, because part of the way that poetry works is that it kind of finds you when you need it. And I think what I really relish in this poem is that the sentences feel extraordinarily competent as made things, and yet I'm never sure who the actor is in the sentence. And I feel like similarly am existing in that muddle right now. That is, it's never quite the father and never quite the son or the speaker doing what they're doing. And then the lines as lines are extraordinarily well crafted, which reinforces the claim with which the poem ends. And if you think I'm wrong about that, please send complaints to www.favoritepoemproject. For his father. When I was young, I looked high and low for a father. And what blonde sons you must have tried on then. But only your blood could give us our 2 men, and in the end, we settled for one another. Whatever death is, it sets pretenders free. The secret loss, or boy, or self-defense that won me your affectionate pretense is in a grave. Now you judge only me. But like a living son, I go on railing a little or praising under my breath, not knowing the generosity of death, fearing your judgment on my old failing. Dear ghost, take pleasure in our good report and bully me no further with my blame. You use my eyes at last. I sign your name deliberately beneath my life and art. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Alice Tseng. I am the Associate Dean of the Faculty for the Humanities. The title is very long, so I always jumble the words. But I like to say my real job is I'm the Professor of History of Art and Architecture. I specialize in Japanese art and architecture. And that's the part of me that will come through much more in the poem that I picked. I was thrilled to have the invitation to share a favorite poem because it's not a question I get often, ever at all, because I work on art and architecture. Usually I'm asked, what's your favorite building? All that, which is great. I love answering questions like that, but I've never asked what's my favorite poem, which I fully appreciate because I do read a lot, obviously, for my work, but not poetry. But in this case, I felt very clever in that as soon as I got the email, I opened up my drawer in my office. There's my poem, because I do keep this poem in my drawer. It's very meaningful to me, not in the sense that it's tied to a specific moment in my life. I do know that at some point, when I started studying Japanese culture and art, I came across in general survey textbooks a lot of translated Japanese poetry, because when you are taking entry-level courses on Japanese culture and art, that's what you get, a lot of very wonderful poems. So I was a freshman in college, and I took the class just because I didn't know that's something I would love eventually. So it was an intro course to Japanese culture, taught by Paul Varley, a very well-known scholar, but of course, as a first year, how would I know? I just said, okay, I'll take the class. So everything read was in translated English, original, obviously, in Japanese, but at that time, I didn't read any Japanese. So I can keep talking because the poem's very short. It's only 17 syllables, and so you all know that's a haiku. And so that's it. So originally, I read this in English translation. Eventually, once I learned, obviously, Japanese eventually, so I was able to read in the original Japanese. And then for the purpose of today, I decided to do my own translation of the poem because of the existing ones. I wasn't very happy with any one translation in particular. So I'll read the poem first in Japanese and then in translation, and then I'll kind of add a final kind of piece of explanation to why I picked this particular haiku. So here's the original Japanese, and you can, in your mind, since I'm a visual person for the art and architecture, before you even hear it, think about the season. We're in fall. Today is perfect. It's dark, wet, not very cheerful. We're at the kind of the 3/4 of the way in our calendar year. So Japanese culture, there's definitely a lot of emphasis on season. So you have to know we're almost to the end of the year and then the whole season. So visualize that in your head. Okay, so the original Japanese. この道や行く人なしに秋の暮れ. So that's the whole poem. So my translation of this is, on this road, with no other traveler, autumn evening. So that's the image. And to me, it's not just about the season, that we're coming to the end of the calendar year. We're all stressed and excited. But it's obviously also about your life. I'm not young anymore, but even as a 19-year-old, 18-year-old, when I first read this, I already felt kind of that pathos, that I know one day I'll get older and, there will be the autumn of my life. And so just all of that, just in the simplicity of those syllables and words, I just felt like it just captured all the feelings I know I'll have one day. And then just for today, I looked up more information about this poem just to understand, when did this poet, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, it is a very famous poet, Matsuo Basho, who wrote this. When did he write this? Turns out this was a poem that he wrote several months just before he passed away. I don't know if you want to know when he passed away, at the age of 50. And then, so that's when I thought, oh dear, my days are numbered. So that was my final thought. So thank you very much.
As to the prediction I made, I told you so. I'm going to read a poem that I sort of surprised myself by making it the last poem I quote in the autobiography that I published this year. I wrote an autobiography called Jersey Breaks, and to my surprise, I found that the last thing I want on the very last pages of the book were this poem by the great Spanish poet Antonio Machado. I'll read the poem to you in Spanish, then English. The two different languages, the native language of the poem and the translation, which, like most translations, can't help but be more gestural than embodying. The difference is important to me, as is the poem. The poem is important to me personally in relation to my failures and successes in life. The poem doesn't just advocate for the idea that everything must be improvised. It doesn't just advocate the importance of improvisation. It asserts that improvisation, making it up as you go along, is inevitable, with all of its advantages and disadvantages. From Proverbios y Cantares by Antonio Machado. Caminante, son tus huellas el camino y nada más. Caminante, no hay camino. Se hace camino al andar se hace el camino. Y al volver la vista atrás se ve la senda que nunca se ha de volver a pisar. Caminante, no hay camino. Caminante, no hay camino, sino estelas en la mar. Translated by Mary G. Berg and Dennis Maloney, and then I'll say a little bit more about the two languages. Traveler, there is no road. Traveler, Your footprints are the only road, nothing else. Traveler, there is no road. You make your own path as you walk. As you walk, you make your own road. And when you look back, you see the path you will never travel again. Traveler, there is no road, only a ship's wake on the sea. There's no road, only the ship's wake on the sea. Clearly, the Spanish does very economically something English cannot do. Caminante no hay camino. We can't say, roadgoer, there is no road. The Spanish has the combination of formality and economy of the poet, the very sophisticated poet who at the end wrote his book, Proverbs and Songs. And it has the fiery concentration of something in its native language. The translation, for me, embodies, among other things, the polyglot, bastardized nature of the English language, the language of an island that was repeatedly invaded, with each wave of invaders expropriating and enslaving and cheating and mating with the preceding invaders and invadees. And it suits my sense of my own culture. Like many of us, the grandchild of immigrants, so that I finished the autobiography wanting to pay tribute to the poem, which was in my mind from early in my life, but also because it is very beautifully read by in one of the Favorite Poem Project videos at favouritepoem.org. Now I'm going to enter into the latest phase of the spirit of improvisation. My very treasured colleague, Ha Jin, is one of the living writers I admire the most. He has made me feel very proud to be employed where I am, and I look on him as a person who's a model for me. He had car trouble today, and he just walked in. So I am going to invite Shui Fei Jin, who publishes as Ha Jin. I'm going to invite him to read his poem, and then I will say one goodbye sentence to everyone after Ha Jin reads a poem to us.
Sorry, I'm late. I didn't know the red line was under repairs on the weekend, so I had to switch to shuttles to get here. Okay, I'm going to read a poem, not by a poet, a Russian poem, but not by a poet, by a novelist. Recently, I finished a novel about a stage director trained in Russia. So after she returned to China, she was supposed to produce drama, produce a lot of plays. So in the early 60s, there was a very popular novel called The Brothers Yeshov by a Russian novelist called, I think his name is Kochetov. And I couldn't get hold of the play, or I couldn't see anything, the footage of the play. But I got the translation of the novel in Chinese. When the novel came out, it was very popular, immensely popular. I think during the first 3 days, it sold more than 600,000 copies. Partly because the novel is very political. It was anti-Khrushchev, and it was nostalgic about the Stalin period. So in a way, politically, it is in agreement with the Chinese leadership's sentiment. The Chinese, the CCP leaned toward Stalinism. They were opposed to Khrushchev. That's why the Chinese were determined to adapt the novel into a play. So the protagonist of my novel was assigned the job. So he had to study the novel and produce the script and eventually the play. The play was never open to the public because it was very political. It exposed the corruption, nepotism, greed in the Soviet Union. So it could backfire. That's why it was very strictly shown in the Great Hall of the People in China. So all the party members must go to the play as political lesson. So the really for the theater was very profitable because they had to, all the party branches had to buy tickets in bulk. But after I finished reading the novel, I was kind of upset because, see, the title, The Brothers Yeshov, really is very ambitious. They echo the great masterpiece, The Brothers Karamazov. So there, in terms of surge and range, it does have that kind of grandeur, but it doesn't have psychological intensity and acuity. It's very plain. In fact, nobody would read it anymore. People don't remember the play anymore. But in the, it's over 600 pages long. In the, there was a character who was a young woman, an engineer, Iskra, and she was an amateur poet. And once she was asked, what was her hobby, she said, I'm writing poetry. And then people asked her to share a poem. She said, okay, don't laugh at me, and then she recited a poem. So among all the 600 pages, these are the only few lines really shine as a little jewel in the novel. That was a lesson, a great lesson, really, because we have to really work hard and make the words distill and become poetry. It doesn't have, okay, I translate these from the Chinese, so I don't read the Russian. Also, it didn't have a title. I put a title called Old Habit. Okay, here's what she recited. At one time, when we're saying goodbye, you said to me, don't lose yourself in the darkness. Do not increase the unrest in my heart. Let us walk in the street light. Let me see you clearly once again. Since then, I'm used to staying close to light, although I no longer can hear the voice of love. There's no one to urge me, no one to call to me, but my body has still kept the old habit. Okay. In a way, I talked to my poetry class about this. We talk so much about language. Sure, language is essential for poetry, the sound, the physical effect. But there's the other side, that is the human drama. See, this poem is not really entrenched or trapped in any language. It's the peculiarity of the human drama, and the sentiment make it very unique. Thank you.
We have demonstrated again that nothing is more important than our bodily and intellectual and emotional art of poetry. Nothing is more important or essential. Therefore, I encourage all the readers to stand up while we clap our hands off for them.